All right. Well, welcome to our Menopause Masterclass. I'm going to introduce everyone so you know who does what. This is Dr. Dineasha Potter-McQuilkin, and she's a double board certified OBGYN and a North American Menopause Society certified menopause practitioner with over 17 years of experience. And her practice is based out of Hoboken. And Lacey is an experienced certified nutritionist who uses her training and her own experience to help women cope with menopausal issues. And your practice is based out of Jersey City. And then Dr. Melanie Llanes, my co-host, is a doctor of physical therapy and the owner of Best Self Wellness. She specializes in women's pelvic health and provides home physical therapy in Hudson County. And I'm Tina Tang, a certified personal trainer and the owner of Iron Strong Fitness, and I specialize in helping women 40 plus add strength training to their lives. So we're going to go straight into, symptoms or things that you might experience. And the first question was for Dr. Potter. Are there ways or accurate tests to indicate you're officially in perimenopause?
So the answer is no. There's no accurate test to indicate or say that, yes, you're 100% in menopause. There are tests that can help, especially if you're no longer having periods. So menopause is 1 year without a period, and it has to be 1 year without a period without another indication. So if you have an IUD, a Mirena IUD, or progesterone only, you may stop having periods so that you'll have 1 year or more than a year without period. That's not menopause. It's without another indication. So someone who's had a hysterectomy, for instance, they may not have a period. So how would you tell if they're in menopause? Well, it may be helpful to do hormone tests at that point, to do an FSH or something else called an AMH, but that's not an end-all be-all. It's more symptomatology. So once you're in the range, we saw the menopausal range, which is 45 to 55, you start having the symptoms, the hallmark symptoms of menopause or perimenopause, which would be hot flashes, sleep disturbances, cognitive decline, vaginal dryness, things like that. Then yes, we could say, okay, you're in menopause with more the symptoms, not so much the lab results. Okay, because those can fluctuate.
And that's helpful to know because there's a lot of marketing online that, take this test and it'll automatically tell you.
Yes, and there are lots of, generally, if I'm going to do a test, I'll do a blood test because that may be helpful, and also to rule out other things because sometimes you can have heat intolerance from thyroid disorder or anemia, iron deficiency, something like that. So it's helpful in that respect, but there's no one test, there's no group of tests. They like to do urine tests sometimes, they'll do saliva tests, things like that, they'll tell you, and they're very expensive. So no, don't fall into that trap, you don't need it.
I love it. The next thing I wanted to ask, probably for you two, is what are some symptoms, or Dr. Llanes, what are some symptoms that happen during perimenopause that often get misdiagnosed? So it's, whoever.
It's kind of like a both question, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so symptoms that people are like, I think something's wrong with me, but it's actually a symptom of, or that doctors will be like, you might have, I don't know, something else going on.
Yeah, so a big one that I see is definitely painful intercourse, vaginal dryness. A lot of physicians may kind of just tuck painful intercourse under the rug, right? They're like, you're just getting older, or you're just probably not so relaxed and you're stressed out, so have some wine. You hear that a lot, right? A lot of physicians are like, just have a glass of wine and it'll be fine, right? And so obviously there's other causes of painful intercourse, but already I'm going to be starting to say, okay, are you talking to your gynecologist? Have you had this discussion? How is your menstrual cycle? Have you noticed a change? And that's when I work together with all of their providers to get a better picture. And exactly what Dr. Dineasha is saying, it's never just one symptom and you say, okay, that's perimenopause or you're in menopause, but it's kind of a whole slew of symptoms, right? So painful intercourse is a huge one. Another one's urinary incontinence. And another one is constipation. Those are the three things that I see the most that start to make me wonder, okay, what are your hormone levels like? What's your menstrual cycle like? Are there other things going on? And obviously, those are also symptoms of postpartum, things like that, or even just musculoskeletal disorder can actually even cause some of that. But already, depending on your age, your hormone level, that's going to be a lot of things that I'm going to be looking at and digging a little deeper in.
And then Dr. Dineasha, oh, did you have anything also, Laura, or?
No.
Okay.
So, in addition to the vaginal dryness and the painful intercourse, you may also have palpitations. I think that's a sign that people aren't aware of for perimenopause or menopause. The cognitive decline, the itchy skin, itchy ears sometimes, joint pain. You could also have sleep disturbances, like I said, but there are I think they're up to, they say 40, I think they're up to 60, honestly, symptoms of perimenopause that may send you to different doctors, but sometimes it's just perimenopause and the decrease in the estrogen.
I think Oprah said that for her, it was the feeling like the blahs.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
she just
And
felt-
I think she also had lots of palpitations. So
Oh,
she
that's
went,
right, yeah.
she went to a cardiologist and started her on, I think, 3 different medications. And then once she saw a menopause specialist and they gave her estrogen, gone. Yeah.
And the big one that I think a lot of times people get concerned about in midlife is weight gain. So maybe, Laura, we could talk about this. Like, we think that weight gain happens because of perimenopause, but there are a slew of other factors.
Well, I think that one of the causes of weight gain is that when you start going into menopause, perimenopause, your estrogen levels decrease, and as your estrogen levels decrease, at the same time, your fat cell production increases, and so that gives you added weight and belly fat. The other thing that happens besides what's going on with your hormones, like estrogen decreasing, testosterone decreasing also affects your metabolism. So it slows down your metabolism. So those are things to think about. And the other thing is insulin resistance. I think that when we think about insulin resistance, a lot of times we're thinking about diabetes. That's usually when we hear about it. But actually, it's any time that your sugar levels are high and your pancreas is trying to put out insulin, it goes into your cells, and your cells, after a while, there's so much sugar and so much insulin, your cells just go, stop, I can't anymore, and that's the resistance. And so that causes you to have more blood sugar, your blood sugar rises, and that causes you to gain weight. So I think weight gain is a big thing, especially for women who are, used to eating relatively well and, maybe working out, and then all of a sudden they are gaining weight. And it's like, okay, so I gained a couple of pounds, no problem, I'll just eat less and work out more. And it's not helping. So that has to do with a lot of what's going on with your hormones and insulin resistance.
In addition, with the decrease in testosterone, you can have a decrease in lean body mass, right? So that can also, and that helps to decrease your metabolism as well. So it puts weight on a little bit easier. And also you're not sleeping well. And then when you sleep, it restores the body. So that's another reason. And also with the fatigue, you have a lot of fatigue. You can have a lot of fatigue during this time. And because of that, physical inactivity. That also, so there's a constellation of symptoms and things that are going on that allows you to gain the weight, but there are things that you could do about it. Yeah.
I have a question. So for Laura, are there also nutritional reasons why, are any shifts in the way people usually eat, like after?
Well, the way you eat definitely has, factors into your weight gain, and it has a lot to do with the insulin resistance. When you're insulin resistant, what normally happens is you have these spikes in insulin. So, you're low, you eat, it goes up, you don't, it goes down. And what you always want to have is something that's very even keeled. So one of the things you can do is, and this is something I always tell all of my clients, and at first I get this look of horror when I say, you need to eat more frequently. And they're like, oh, I'm like, no, I didn't say you need to eat more food. You only need to eat more frequently in order to keep that insulin at an even level. Because if it's not, then you're insulin resistance and you're going to gain weight. But if you can keep it even, then you should be okay. It will help, definitely.
Thank you. I think besides the people who are active regularly, in midlife, in addition, a lot of people become less active because they rise in their careers and they have kids, and you end up focusing on your kids' schedule. And so people walk less, they are moving less in midlife. And when I say walk less, always shocked whenever I ask someone that I start with, like, what's your step count? Because I think when you live in an urban environment, you think step count is like, oh, I get a lot of steps. But the number 3,000 and below is very normal for a lot of people in other parts, like not in Jersey City, New York. And I think people underrate how much the daily movement, like just going to and from somewhere, also affects weight gain in midlife. The next question is going to be about the two symptoms we talked about, incontinence and constipation. Can you talk a little bit more about, so incontinence as in, it doesn't mean, it can mean like peeing when you run across the street, peeing when you're working out. So it's not even like something like horrible you think of an elderly person in the constipation.
Yeah, so there's actually different types of incontinence. And some people think when they use that word that you're going to have like a heavy urine output, but it could just mean it's really just means urine coming out when you don't want it to, right? So anytime that you're having urine coming out, whether it even just be I laughed a little bit or I jumped, that's still considered incontinence, but a lot of times I just use the word leakage to make people feel a little bit more comfortable with it. But you can also have urinary incontinence when you have an urge to go to the bathroom. So you have urge incontinence, you have stress incontinence, which is I did something and I had a little leak, right? Urge incontinence, I had the urge to go to the bathroom and then I couldn't hold it and I leaked a little bit. And then you have mixed urinary incontinence where you have a little mix of both. And that happens for many women and men as well, but many women, they experience that a lot as they get older, right? And a lot of women, they believe that's just a part of aging, but a lot of times it also can be due to perimenopause and menopause. And there's other factors as well, but when you have that decline in estrogen, you're having decline in muscle mass that we're talking about, and we're having decreased tissue thickness in our pelvic floor muscles. And a lot of times that's going to cause a lot of weakness in our pelvic floor, and so that's going to cause some urinary incontinence. But the result isn't always just hormone therapy, which is very helpful, but then it becomes a whole part of what I do is also looking at your lifestyle and how you move and what habits you can do to account for the fact that you're having decreased tissue density there, right? So it's going to be, I always send people, like I do have them get vaginal cream, a lot of times like estradiol, like some sort of estrogen cream, and that can help, but it's not the cure-all because then a lot of times if they have weakness at the hips, and that's always the biggest issue, weakness at the hips causes increased compensation at your pelvic floor. So your pelvic floor muscles they do 5 things. Stability, sphincteric control, meaning it closes sphincters in our rectum and in our urethra, so where the urine comes out. It creates stability, and it's for sexual function as well. But they're not the main stabilizers, I tell everyone. So if you have weak glutes, if you have weak core muscles, then your pelvic floor muscles are going to kick in even harder to try to give you stability. And when they're kicking in, just the same way as you guys, if you're working at a factory and you're doing extra work that you're not supposed to, you're going to get tired. And you're not going to want to do sphincteric control. And you're not going to want to do its actual main job, right? And so that's when things like pain with sexual dysfunction, urinary incontinence, that's when it happens. And a lot of times it has to do with weakness at the hips, poor core control. So then they're like bulging out their stomach to give them some sort of stability. And that creates a leakage too. So that's why my job is a specialist in movement and how you're functioning. So I'm doing an orthopedic exam as well as an internal pelvic floor exam as well. And so I'm looking at how everything works as a system versus just looking at your pelvic floor muscles. And then I'm looking at your diet, things like that. So that's just kind of like my whole thing on like incontinence and things like that when it comes to menopause.
We'll have Laura, you want to talk about it in terms of constipation?
No, I'm going to leave that to her. I'm just
Okay.
going to talk about the constipation.
Yeah.
About which one?
Constipation.
Yeah, that's what
Did we ask about constipation already?
and constipation.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
I just get onto this like soapbox of incontinence, right? So when it comes to constipation, which Laura's going to talk to you a lot about diet management with that, because she's a specialist in that. But what I'm looking at with constipation is also looking at how much you're moving. Your hip flexors surround your colon, So if you're in a desk job, you're not working as much, it compresses the colon, you're not getting as much movement. The way that your colon works, it has a pumping effect, but your hip flexors are a big pump of that. So if you're a sitting job, it's not pumping a lot, then you're gonna get a lot of constipation and poor movement. The other factor is also your toileting positioning. A lot of times we're not sitting properly on the toilet to have relaxation of our pelvic floor muscles. What should happen when we're sitting on the toilet is the pelvic floor muscles are completely not doing anything. But if our feet aren't planted on the ground, our pelvic floor muscles will kick in and tighten up because our feet aren't planted. So if you get your feet planted on the floor, you get your knees higher than your hips. That turns off the puborectalis, which is a pelvic floor muscle, and it allows the bowel and stool to come out, right? So the squatty potty, right? We've seen all of this on TV. That's a very good stool to use because it puts you in optimal position, right? And it allows the bowels to come out. You don't have to get the squatty potty brand. I'm not their affiliate, but you can just put some yoga blocks underneath your feet to get you in optimal position.
You're essentially telling us the way we always hover is not a great idea.
And hovering is not a good thing, right? And that's for urine and bowel output. You want to always be sitting comfortably down so that your pelvic floor muscles can turn off. Remember, the pelvic floor muscles are also for stability. So if you're hovering, they kick in. And so you have to have your whole body completely relaxed on the toilet seat, feet elevated so your knees are higher than your hips, and then you can lean forward, and then that can allow the bowels to come out. And I tell this for both men and women. And a lot of times constipation causes urinary incontinence because your stool is filled in your colon is next to your bladder gets compressed, and then you're having a lot of more pressure there. You're having stronger urges to go to the bathroom. So a lot of times I don't correct urinary incontinence stuff until I correct constipation too as well, right? And constipation a lot of people say, well, I go every day, right? So it should be fine. But are you having a hard time getting it out? Are you straining to get it out? And are you feeling completely empty? And that's a big part too. It's like, well, I go a little bit every day. I always feel like there's something there though. And they get the bloated feelings and stuff like that. And so I'm still considering that as outlet dysfunction constipation because you're having a hard time with it, right? And then some people say that, oh, as long as I go every other day, that should be fine. Again, it's symptom-based, but a lot of times my goal, especially when you're in perimenopause and menopause, is to go daily because we're getting rid of waste and we're getting rid of excess hormones and things like estrogen, things like that. So it helps us balance, which is like the fad word of menopause of balancing hormones, but it helps regulate your hormones a little bit better.
Well, now we know how it all works. This is what you can do about it. So one of the things with diet and constipation is you're always told to eat more fiber. That's a big thing, and that is true. However, when you have fiber, you also have to have water, because if you just have fiber, then you're going to have a big ball of fiber in your gut that's not going anywhere. It's going to make you more constipated. Fiber, we talk about fiber as it being the intestinal broom. It sweeps out everything from the intestine, but it can't do that without water. You have to have water. It is so important to drink water all the time, but especially when you're in perimenopause, menopause, because one of the things that water does is it regulates your body temperature. So that's, aside from dealing with constipation. But you need to have water to wash through the fiber, and then together they really help in clearing out your bowels. Now, fiber, where do we get fiber from? Fiber comes from carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are always that bad word. We don't want carbohydrates. Without carbohydrates, you would be dead. You have to have carbohydrates. However, not all carbohydrates are equal. So you want to have carbohydrates that have a lot of fiber, like apples, broccoli, cauliflower, kale. These are all very good carbohydrates to have. Broccoli, cauliflower, kale, those are also very good for stabilizing hormones. So those, if you could have that every day, that would be a really good thing. The other thing that that works in tandem with constipation is lowering the amount of sugar you're eating. And when you think about sugar, I don't want you to think about, oh, well, I can't eat fruits and vegetables because they have so much sugar in them. Fruits and vegetables actually have a lot of fiber, so it slows down the amount of time it takes sugar to go through your system, and you want it to go slowly. So you don't want to do that. I think that when I work with people, one of the ways that we look at sugar is sugar, actually what you do, how much sugar you put in your coffee, that kind of things. But the other thing is to be aware of all of the hidden sugars in foods. It is amazing. One of the healthiest things that you can do for yourself is learn to read food labels. When you look at food labels, you don't necessarily need to know how many calories are in something, because that's another whole discussion. But you do want to know how much added sugar is in the food that you're eating. And this is usually in processed foods, like your boxes, and I mean a can of tomato paste or whatever. Check and see how much added sugar is in there. That's always on the label. There is going to be sugar, which could be natural sugar to the product, which is okay, and then there's the added sugar. So we want to decrease the sugar, we want to increase the water, and we want to make sure that we're having fiber. And if you do all of that in conjunction with movement, because nothing's going to move if you don't move, so you need to have that happening also. And I think that that's how I would address constipation.
Thank you. The next topic is something that people don't talk about or realize also comes in perimenopause, which is painful sex and having like dry vaginal walls, which leads to the painful sex. So, Dr. Potter, Dr. Dineasha Potter-McQuilkin, can you talk about what is happening in the vagina,
Yes. So in the perimenopausal period or menopause, you have a decrease in estrogen, also a decrease in testosterone, because you have testosterone receptors vaginally as well. And because of that, because of the decrease, you can have vaginal dryness, loss of elasticity. When you're premenopausal, when it's time to have a baby, if you choose to do so, you need that elasticity. You need the rugae or the folds in the vaginally to stretch so that the baby can come through the canal. But when you're in the menopausal period, because you don't need it, it declines, and you can have that loss of elasticity. The estrogen also helps to lubricate the area, bring blood flow to the area, and because of that, you have more moisture as well. But with the loss of all of this, you can have painful intercourse. Talk about things that you can do. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes,
Sounds
okay.
Good. Yeah.
So there are several things that we can do for this, and usually we try to start with lubricants or moisturizers. So vaginal moisturizers, they could be silicone-based, they could be water-based. I usually like to start with the water-based ones for the vaginal moisturizers, the one with hyaluronic acid, because those help to keep the moisture in. And you can use that every other night. You would just put it in vaginally and use it every other night. Right before you go to sleep is generally the time that I like to use it, because it won't come out if you're moving around during the day. So you could certainly do that. And for lubrication is used for intercourse. I like the silicone-based ones because you don't have to reapply it. You could use it throughout the evening, and that's very helpful as well. So we usually start with the vaginal moisturizers, the lubricants, but as you spoke about before, estrogen is what I like to use. If someone could tolerate that, if they want to use it, we try to use the estrogen. And there's really no one that I could think of who has a contraindication to the estrogen. It's good for most women to use the estrogen, and that's the only thing that really changes the architecture of the tissue. Right? So the moisturizer and lubricant is great. They just coat the area, but they won't change the actual tissue. So they won't bring the folds back. They won't bring the elasticity back. So that's helpful to use the estrogen as well. Or a DHEA, which is also a testosterone precursor. So you can use that as well.
Great. I'm going to have Dr. Llanes answer on. I'm just going to add one thing. So I think when we talk about that, it seems like this symptom that just happens to other people, but I can tell you that for me, my vagina got dry, but I was just like, oh my God, why is this painful? So I use the estradiol insert, and that does make a difference. And I remember posting about this specific symptom on my Instagram. I had many women contact me saying like, yeah, it's become painful to have sex because of their vaginal walls being drier. So it's not abnormal, and it happens, I think, a lot more frequently than people will admit. Probably because they feel ashamed, like something's wrong with me. I don't know, maybe. And then if it hurts, it's going to affect, like, you know, how often you're going to want to have sex.
Yes, that could be a decrease in desire as well. And one thing that I also want to add that you brought up is for other symptoms of menopause, like hot flashes, things like that, they would last for from 4 to 10 years, and they go away. For most women, about 15% continue. For most women, they go away. But the vaginal dryness, that continues. So it's good so that will not go away. If 10 years are just, you know, the estrogen decreases, that will continue for years and years and years. So it's helpful to find a solution early on, something that's useful. And you can use that vaginal estrogen if you choose to do so until your 80s, 90s, you can continue to use it. So it's very helpful.
And I think people are scared when they think about taking hormones. What she's talking about, you're not ingesting it. It's literally just like putting on the surface of your vagina.
Yeah, so even with a history of breast cancer, which is what most women are afraid of, or if they had breast cancer in the past, the amount of using the vaginal estrogen every day is equal to 1 tablet of the estrogen one day. So the vaginal estrogen every day for an entire year is equal to having 1 tablet of the estrogen by mouth. So the absorption is equal. So usually if someone had a history of breast cancer, I speak with their oncologist, and a lot of them approve to use the vaginal estrogen because it's a very, very low dose. And there are some that are microdose, like 4 micrograms, which is the lowest that they have. We usually use that, and they have, you know, improved symptoms.
Thank you.
Could you just comment, if we have questions here, so for example, can you comment on the intake of estrogen, that being in the danger zone, it's not dangerous at all, is that sort of a myth?
You want to do that?
Oh, no, you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for so in terms of breast cancer, taking estrogen in terms of, yes. So there are the risk for hormone therapy ingested, so systemic hormone therapy. Breast cancer is the biggest one, the one that most women are afraid of. And with that comes from the WHI study that concluded about 2002 that they stopped it because they found an increased risk of breast cancer. When they looked back at the study, it was actually they had 2 arms. They had an estrogen against placebo and then estrogen progesterone with placebo. And you don't need to take progesterone if you had a hysterectomy, because the progesterone is just to protect the endometrial lining. So in the group with the estrogen only, there was actually a decreased risk. There was a decreased risk of breast cancer at that 7-year mark. So that's when they saw that decreased risk. So there is no increased risk with the estrogen. In the estrogen and progesterone only arm, they did see a slightly increased risk. It's very slight. It's 1 additional case per 1,000 users annually. But when I review this with patients, I look at their risk and their history. And we know that estrogen can also decrease your risk of heart disease. So when I meet each patient individually, and we talk about their risk. And if they have no family history of breast cancer, all of their mammograms have been fine, but everyone in their family had a history of heart disease, then that's their greatest risk. It's not the breast cancer, it's more the heart disease. And I know that up to 50% it can decrease your risk of heart disease. So it's more beneficial for them, if that was your question. There is also a slightly increased risk of VTE or DVTs as well. They did find that in the study, and stroke. A DVT, like a blood clot in your leg, they found an increased risk of that and stroke. But that risk is mitigated or decreased if you use a transdermal. So that was with estrogen by mouth, right? So if you use a transdermal form like a patch or a spray or a gel, that risk is decreased as well. So it depends on the form that you use. Also in the study, in the WHI study, they used synthetic. So they used synthetic estrogen and a synthetic progesterone. So it was made the CEE that was made from pregnant horses' urine. That's how they made the estrogen. And they use a synthetic progesterone, which we do not generally, most menopause practitioners, I do not use that form. I generally use the bioidentical form, so FDA-approved bioidentical forms. I use a transdermal, which is a patch, and a pill that you could take every night in terms of progesterone. And they found that with this kind of progesterone, they saw no increased risk of the breast cancer with this kind of progesterone. So it's more the synthetic. So it's hard to apply those findings to now, right? It's hard to apply because that was so long ago and different formulations used. Right? But now, and they did a recent study in France and in the UK with the current progesterone that we use, and they found no increased risk. Right? So it's very important that when you see a gynecologist, a menopause practitioner, you talk about your individual risk. That's the best way to do it, because it may be beneficial to you but harmful to others. Right? So it depends on the person individually.
Why would you supplement with the progesterone?
So, yes, a very good question. So you need the progesterone to protect the endometrial lining. So they found that if you use the estrogen alone and you have a uterus, you can have an increased risk of endometrial cancer. So when you use the progesterone, protects the lining. So if you still have a uterus, if you haven't had a hysterectomy, then you need both. You need the estrogen and the progesterone. If you had a hysterectomy, you only need the estrogen, so you don't need that progesterone, and you don't have that increased risk because you don't have the uterus, you don't have the increased risk of the endometrial cancer. And also remember, the estrogen only arm of the study had that decreased risk of breast cancer, so you have that benefit there as well. You're welcome.
I just wanted to add, I think it's so important to see a menopause specialist. I work with so many women who are going through perimenopause and menopause, and they see their physicians who are not specialists, and they automatically dismiss them taking hormone therapy because of the risk of cancer. And I had even one patient who loved her estrogen, she talks about it all the time, but they took her off just because they were scared that she was gonna get cancer. There was no actual link to it, and she had no cancer in her history. So I think it's so important to see someone who's a specialist and who understands all of the risk and who knows how to look at your options because of what your history is and what your symptoms are. So super important. I want to add also, in terms of painful intercourse, there is samples in there for vaginal moisturizers and lubrication. They're water-based. They're by Good Clean Love, so there's no additives to that. So that's going to be really great for you guys. So it's your free added benefit in your little packets. And then I do have patients who are, no matter what, and I have one that I'm thinking of who is very scared of hormones. She's just convinced she just doesn't want it, even though I think it's going to be really beneficial for her. But she's having a lot of vaginal dryness and painful intercourse. So with that, I know how to work with someone who's very scared, and I'm hopefully going to help with a lot of education, hopefully get her to see a specialist like Dr. Dineasha. But things that I do as a pelvic floor physical therapist when you're having painful intercourse, because you're having that decreased elasticity, it brings up sometimes a lot of old injuries that you may have had. So if you've had children in the past and you've had some scar tissue at the vaginal opening, that tends to kind of come up later during the perimenopause stage and menopause stage. So if they're having painful intercourse, when I start working on that scar tissue and stretching that out or doing manual stretching of the pelvic floor muscles, combined with proper coordination of their core, then we reduce a lot of the tension that happens at the pelvic floor muscles. And so that can also help with reducing discomfort during intercourse. Plus, we're talking about positioning. Are you laying down? Can we try different positions? I'm looking at the orthopedic stance as well and seeing what positions can we get you in so that you're having more comfortable intercourse. And I'm also helping you talk to your partners so that you can talk to your partners and let them know that, hey, we got to take this slow because I'm having some discomfort. And that's a big part that I think should be coming up more in conversation with our partners, is having that open conversation, like, I'm going through perimenopause or I'm having these symptoms, let's take it slow, let's use some extra lubrication if we need to, and then let's try different positions as well. So I try to help with the lifestyle things that people can do to reduce under discomfort during intercourse.
Can you remind us what the difference between perimenopause is and menopause?
Yeah, so when you're in perimenopause, your hormones are still fluctuating, they're still changing. You're still having periods, right? But they're just starting to be irregular, right? Menopause, you're officially in menopause when you had not like a year of menstrual cycle, right? Okay.
And then we'll talk about the most common symptom, which is hot flashes. Maybe you can talk about, Dr. Dineasha, why that happens, and then some of the remedies, and then we'll talk about nutritional assistance.
Yeah, so the hot flashes, and you have it greatest during that perimenopause transition. So when the hormones are starting to decline. So in the menopause, during menopause, that 12 months with no period, the hormones are virtually gone. Sometimes your estrogen level is 0. But during that perimenopause, it's low, it's going down. So you can have the fluctuation. Some days it could be low, but it can bump back up. It can kind of do that for sometimes up to 10 years. Because of that decrease in the estrogen, you begin to have hot flashes, and the hot flashes at night are called night sweats, and they can keep you up during the evening. There are some things that you can do about them, and generally, if they're mild, you can start lifestyle changes. You can generally tell you dress in layers. So if it's, you can put a camisole on, a tank top, a t-shirt, and then a cardigan, and then if you're hot, then you would take them off. If you're cold, you would put them on. In terms of dietary, which I'm sure you'll talk about in a minute, the decreased caffeine, decreased alcohol intake as well, and finding what triggers you is very helpful, because you may notice that I'm pretty much fine, but every time I have my morning cup of coffee, I have a hot flash. So finding your triggers are helpful as well. There are non-hormonal, because I have patients as well who they do not want to hear anything about the hormones. So we do non-hormonal options, which is certainly fine. There are some natural things that you can do. There's a pollen extract that I like. There's a company called Bonafide.com that's one of my favorites, and they have a pollen extract that's very, very helpful. Or you can do something like Estroven, so that you can get that from Target, Walgreens. It's over the counter, has natural supplements in it as well that you can use. In addition, you can then use, we could do, what's it called, hypnotherapy. Hypnotherapy has been shown to be very helpful. It can decrease your hot flashes by up to 74%. So if you find a trained hypnotherapist, and if you want information, I know one who's very good, if you could decrease your hot flashes significantly, and cognitive behavioral therapy as well. If you want to do the hormone therapy, and like we talked about before, it can decrease your risk of fractures. It can decrease your risk of colorectal cancer, of diabetes, of heart disease, so it can be helpful in many aspects. If you decide to do the hormone therapy, a transdermal for the benefits we spoke about before, that decreased risk of the strokes and the VTE, a transdermal estrogen, and if you have a uterus, a progesterone as well. The progesterone at night, because it helps you to sleep. So we explore those as well.
And how about with nutrition, Laura?
So nutritionally, if you have hot flashes, you really want to know what your triggers are, absolutely, but caffeine is definitely a trigger, and any spicy foods, so that makes sense, right? Anything that makes you hot, when you eat spicy foods, you're feeling hot, it works from the outside in, and so you want to eliminate that. So the big eliminations are spicy food, alcohol, and caffeine. But every woman is different, and maybe caffeine doesn't really bother you, then you're okay. And also with hot flashes and night sweats being the same, if you are drinking alcohol and it has an effect, you may want to not drink it or not drink it close to bedtime, because then it'll just exacerbate your symptoms. Also, you want to be as comfortable as you can, as cool as you can. So, I don't know, I used to walk around with like a handheld fan during the day just because it was like, oh, it's so hot in here. It's so hot in here as it made, and you don't want to, and like Dr. Dineasha said, dress in layers. I think that when I was having hot flashes, the worst thing was to be on a New York subway in the middle of winter and wanting to rip my clothes off, right? It's really bad. So you don't want to get to that point if you can drink a lot of water. And, I know that a lot of people, a lot of my clients would say, well, if I drink more water, I'm going to pee more. Well, yes, you are for a while until your body regulates, and then that shouldn't happen. Just, know where every bathroom is, That's really helpful. But I think it's worth it to drink more for so many other reasons, not just for the hot flashes, and know that, it's going to cool your body off also. and keep your drinks cool. You're always going to feel hotter if you're drinking hot foods. I mean, it's like, oh, I'm going to have hot tea in the summer. Well, if you have hot tea in the summer, you're going to sweat a lot. So make your drinks iced, like make it iced coffee, iced tea, and just know what your triggers are. As far as specific foods, I don't think there are any unless there are specific foods specifically to you. So there may be foods that just, make you heat up. Avoid those. But I think the one thing
There's
to
not an acidic versus alkaline thing associated with this?
not really. It's basically, how it affects you. I think that, one of the things you want to do with nutrition in general is to be really mindful. Like, if you eat this, how do you feel? How does eating that make you feel? And in menopause, it's like, well, I used to always eat that and I was fine, and now I'm not. You just have to be aware of that. So I think that's it.
Hi, my name is Lacey. I'm happy to be here today. I have a question regarding hydration. So back in January, I made a trip to the emergency room and found out that I was slightly dehydrated. Now, water has never been my favorite thing to drink liquid. I drink lots of smoothies, I drink juices, but water, I didn't want to drink a lot of it, especially because of my job. I would go to the bathroom all the time. I'm like, I don't want to go to the bathroom. But someone recently told me that I can do electrolytes because as you have these hot flashes, your body's losing water and it's also losing electrolytes. So maybe adding some electrolytes to my liquid intake would help. What do you say to that? Is that something that I should do, or should I just drink water that has electrolytes in them?
Okay, I think that you should drink water. I think electrolytes are really good when you're very dehydrated. I think one type of electrolyte you could have is coconut water, but it's basically water. You're still going to be peeing the same amount whether you're drinking water or coconut water.
Right.
But there definitely electrolytes are a way to replenish your body fluids, and I think that maybe if you're drinking water and you're feeling like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to have to pee if I drink this, sort of space it out. There is a formula to how much water one should drink, and it's half of your body weight in ounces. I mean, and water is, if you're drinking herbal teas, that can count as water, right? Caffeinated is liquid, but it's also a diuretic, so that's going to make you pee more. So I would sort of steer away from that. But I don't. What are electrolytes? They're different. Gatorade is like an electro, but it's right. But I was just going to say, I would never suggest that you do that. I'm a real proponent of less sugar is better, and so you don't want to do that. But if you could mix it up, maybe. I mean, do you not like water?
I am, well, not particularly. I'm just on
Okay.
drinking
Right.
lots of water. Like, I will drink water, but not the required amount. Not
Right.
half my body weight of water
Right.
like I'm supposed to. That's always been really difficult. I can drink 16 ounces of water, so I always felt like, well, I'm getting some in, and then I'm getting my juices in, and I'm getting my smoothies in, so okay.
Like, really, realistically, I mean, yes, we would like everybody to drink more water. You should drink more water, but water comes in different forms. Like in the summer, it's always easier to drink water because we're hot and we want to cool down, so we're drinking water. But also in the summer, the foods that you eat are different. You're going to be eating a lot of wet foods. So wet foods are a lot of fruits, all of the berries have a very high water content. Salads, lettuces have a very high water content. So you're not only getting your water, I mean, realistically, you're not only getting your water from what you're drinking, you are going to get it from your foods too. Now, the problem with dehydration is not a good thing. We don't ever want to get dehydrated. The problem that happens to a lot of people as far as water and dehydration is like, I've people say to me, I don't drink a lot of water, I don't need a lot of water. I never feel thirsty. The problem with that is, yes, you don't drink a lot of water and you don't feel thirsty, but why don't you feel thirsty? You don't feel thirsty because the body, if you don't give it a lot of water regularly, shuts down the thirst mechanism, and you don't know that you're thirsty, and that can be very dangerous. So, just make sure that you're drinking water, eating wet foods. I mean, and I always say, start really upping your water in the summer, and then it becomes a habit by the time it's winter, and it's not going to be as difficult. But have gazpacho, have cucumbers, think about all the wet foods that you can eat too. But yes, and if you feel that you are getting dehydrated, definitely electrolytes are a good thing to have, but I would go with like coconut water, which is a really good one.
Thank you. But that was the first time it ever happened. So it sort of threw me off a little bit. And what I found out recently, because I did try the coconut water as well, is that it's a diuretic, and I kept going to the bathroom. Oh my God.
So a big part I wanted to add is that we should be able to drink adequate amounts of water without having to go to the bathroom so often. And there are different reasons as to why we're getting frequent urges and we can't hold it. And then it becomes a pelvic floor issue or a musculoskeletal issue that could be contributing to increased urgency. So there's things that we can actually do. There's actually stretches you can do and things that you can do to minimize those symptoms. The other part, as we get older, and even it starts even like when I say older, I mean like once we start hitting in our 30s, we start to actually be also magnesium deficient as well. So magnesium becomes also a big part in what I'm looking at. I'm working with their physician, making sure they can take some magnesium, but that can also contribute to dehydration, constipation, as well as musculoskeletal tightness and pain. And so that could be also a reason as to why you're feeling dehydrated. Because you're also having smoothies and things like that. Because it sounds like that you are having water things, like things of water, but your body's not using it, and you might still not be taking it in enough, but you also might be having some sort of deficiencies, as well as some sort of things that might be contributing to maybe some increased urgencies like muscle tightness and things like that. So on average, we should be able to go to the bathroom every it should be a duration of 2 hours. Right, so if you're feeling like you're going every hour, every 30 minutes, then we're starting to think you're having urinary frequency, and that could be because due to hormone issues as well as musculoskeletal issues as well, things like that. So there's things that we can work on, and you should never be like a big part too is like, oh, I didn't drink today, I better chug all my water and catch up, and you can't. And there's also a stretch reflex that happens in your bladder. So if you chug the water, it's going to cause urgency. So you can't play catch up, otherwise you're going to go to the bathroom a lot. So you have to have just like about a cup, what I tell people, a cup every hour. So you'll have about 8 ounces every hour. That can minimize the urgency and the stretch reflex.
Also, one of the things I always tell people is like, you're going to have to be drinking all day long. Fill up your bottles, drink them like Melanie said, you never want to just chug everything at once. Just spread it out. Have the water with you, and you're just drinking it, And also, when you're drinking it like a cup at a time over time, you're not going to have the same urgency to go to the bathroom to pee because, the water is just a consistent. Somebody?
Can we talk about the role of phyto foods like phytoestrogen, phytotestosterone, as well as other type of items that we intake, like either herbs for the Western herbalism, like red clover, and or TCM related medicine like gumquan that we put in our food? If you could talk about that, that'd be great.
Do you want to talk about that now?
Yeah, I think we're going to have them do like a specialized thing right after these collab
And
questions.
we'll definitely
And I
get to
wrote it down to add it for her.
Oh, before we move on to
Yep.
the topic, I just wanted to say I would struggle with going to the bathroom a lot too. Yeah. And I've noticed that like when I'm really stressed, I go a lot more frequently. Like if I'm just like happy, right? I don't need to go as much. And so I just wanted to add that because it's something that like
Absolutely, and so I talk a lot in my pelvic floor sessions about how our parasympathetic and sympathetic, so our fight or flight system, versus our rest and digest system. Our fight or flight system creates muscle tension. Muscle tension, a lot of times we hold it in our jaw and our pelvic floor, so when we're stressed out, it creates a lot of tension in our pelvic floor. Pelvic floor tension creates bladder urgency, and we tend to go to the bathroom a little bit more frequently. So I'm always going over things on how to reduce things that we can do to manage our stress, because we can't get rid of stress in life, it happens, but how we can go over it so it doesn't transcend into our body.
All right, the next topic, and I promise we're going to get to the phyto. Yes, sorry, I always get that word confused. Is insomnia, which comes sometimes for people when they get hot flashes at night, but it also is just also in general a symptom of perimenopause. Can you talk about, maybe explain why people get insomnia during this time period, or why women do?
Well, yeah, so there are several reasons as to why, like you said, the night sweats can cause it, but also with a decrease in progesterone. And progesterone is your first hormone to decrease during this time. The progesterone acts on what's called the GABA receptors in the brain, and those are the ones to relax you and to put you to sleep. So with that decrease in progesterone, you can have insomnia or trouble falling asleep. The decrease in estrogen, you can have trouble staying asleep as well, or those early morning awakenings. So it's the hormone, the changes in your hormones or the fluctuations in your hormones that can cause this as well.
So when I started having this, and I had asked my gynecologist, who was not a menopause specialized gynecologist, he just said, you have to deal with it. So can you give some, and then I ended up switching gynecologists, but can you talk about some options and all, I have my experience with the CBTI, so I can talk about this.
Okay, so you don't have to just deal with it. Certainly the hormone therapy. So like I said before, with the progesterone, that's the first one I add, especially if the sleeping is an issue. So you can try the natural or the bioidentical progesterone that you take in the evening. It's called prometrium or micronized progesterone is the one that I usually recommend. Estrogen as well, especially if the hot flashes. No, it's a prescription one. But you could certainly see a menopause specialist such as myself, and you could discuss that as well. But estrogen as well, so if you're having the night sweats, we add that. But having a good sleep routine, so that's where I like to start, is having your bedroom, recognizing the bedroom as just for sleep and sex, right? So I don't have movie night in the bedroom, especially if you're having trouble sleeping. You want to, as soon as your body gets into the bedroom, okay, it's time for me to go to sleep. So having that recognition is very helpful. You want to try your best to go to sleep the same time and wake up the same time every day. So training your body to do that. If you're in the bed and you're not falling asleep right away, what I like for you to get up and do so. After about 20 minutes, if you're not falling asleep, get up and do something else. Because again, I don't want you to think that when I go to bed, I'm just supposed to lay there for hours and hours. You want to train your body to do that. Things that relax you, you want to do that before bed as well. Sometimes journaling may help. Journaling also helps to de-stress, because sometimes you may realize anxiety is increased at this time as well, and your brain can race at night. So getting everything out, putting that down in a book, leaving that in the bedstand or wherever, if you did your writing in the living room, wherever that is, leaving it there and then going to sleep. So having a good sleep routine is where we start, but also you can add those hormones if needed.
And I had originally, when I switched gynecologists, started with the hormone therapy, and for me, it wasn't really helping me stay asleep. So I would fall asleep, but not stay asleep. And then what I ended up going to was CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, specifically for insomnia. And I think that's also like a first line of defense too, outside of hormones. Prior to doing that, I had gone to my regular doctor since the gynecologist hadn't helped, and he reluctantly prescribed Ambien because he didn't know about CBTI as an option, which should be your first option outside if the hormone between that and hormones, and it helped a lot because CBTI, some of the practice is what she's describing about how you deal with your bedtime, but it really is about changing your mindset about sleep, because insomnia becomes a vicious cycle where you're like, oh my God, I'm not sleeping. I'm going to be exhausted tomorrow. Oh my God, I would think stuff like, I'm going to get dementia because if I never sleep, I'm going to end up getting dementia or Alzheimer's. And it becomes this horrible cycle. And then in the middle of the night, you start thinking about like just all the bad things. You know how when you can't fall asleep, it's every bad thing that you can think of, that's what happens at night. So going through something like CBTI, you work with a therapist who really is like your sleep coach, helping you figure out what you're doing at night. They actually have specific practices. One of it is not what they call sensory depth. I forgot what it's. Basically, if you're lying in bed, you're not supposed to lie in bed. You have to get out of bed because you want to only think of bed as somewhere you sleep. And they have a couple other go-to strategies. For me, it ended up being more of what they call ACT, acceptance commitment therapy, which is like, okay, so I'm not sleeping. I'm going to take this time to rest. The long and short of it is CBTI is effective, and they also recommend it for people with PSTD because it's a long-term solution because it changes the way you regard this, which is, probably the best tool you can have is just how you regard your sleep. So that's my thing about insomnia related to menopause. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that insomnia is really huge, and especially if you are getting night sweats and that wakes you up. I think that, one of the things I suggest is like, you really just want to sleep train yourself. If you have kids and you've ever slept, done sleep training, you really have to do that for yourself and just figure out a routine. And I think you have to actually prepare yourself and your environment for sleep. I mean, I know people like, oh, I can't sleep. I just watch the news and I can't. Why are you watching the news before you go to bed? You're never going to go to sleep. You're going to be like all the time. So you want to have your environment be an environment that is conducive for sleeping. The temperature is also important. You want to be able to sleep in a room that's cooler rather than warmer. And especially if you're going through menopause, you're getting hot flashes anyway. You want that, you want the temperature to be cool. There are other things that can help you sleep. Tart cherry juice is one of the, primary food ways. 2 cups of tart cherry juice before you go to sleep actually has been researched and proven to help you sleep. I personally have my thing of, I drink a cup of chamomile tea before I go to bed. It calms me down. Anything that, as long as I can turn my brain off, I'm usually okay. The other thing that happens is, you're sleeping and then you wake up because you have to go pee. And it's like, then you're awake. I worked with pregnant women for a long time, and I would always say the same thing. If you wake up to pee, do not wake up. Do not start thinking. Just don't. You just go to and you go back to bed and you don't think about anything, because once you start thinking, it's over. Your brain is going to be like do 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 do. So, make your environment sleep friendly, keep it cooler, prepare yourself to sleep. Turn off all of the devices. Turn your phone over if you want to have it there so you don't have the light, and then go to sleep. And then also, like everyone said, if you wake up and you're lying there for a while, get up. I mean, one of my tricks is I get up, I go and I read cookbooks, because cookbooks are just like, you don't have to engage with them. They've got pretty pictures. It's like this. You read them, and you're just like, and you have a cup of chamomile tea and you're back to sleep. But everybody has their own little thing that they have to work on to go back to sleep, because sleep is really important. I mean, you can decide not to eat. You can actually say, I'm never going to eat anymore, and you will just die. You can't decide not to sleep. We have a lot of accidents happening with drivers who fall asleep at the wheel because your body makes you sleep. You never want to get to that situation. You want to have a regular sleep routine.
In addition, when you were talking about the cherry juice, that has a natural melatonin in it, so that's why that works. So, and your melatonin decreases naturally as you age, so we may sometimes we add that as well. And you want to, certainly physical activity is very important, but space that out. Don't have that too close to bedtime, because that can keep you up, and your biggest carbohydrate meal, not too close to bedtime as well, right? And also, when you get up, if you have to get up to pee in the evening, don't check your phone, because that's it's always, I have to check. No, don't check your, because that's going to keep you up. Right? Yeah.
Just if you do pee a lot in the middle of the night, stop drinking or eating 2 to 3 hours before bed. that should get you through the night. And if it doesn't, then come see me, because then there's definitely something going on, or see a pelvic floor physical therapist. I could refer you to a bunch of people.
And the alcohol, right? The alcohol.
Oh, yeah, and no
Sorry,
alcohol.
question.
Oh, yeah, so I'm 38, I haven't, like, hit, menopause, but I'm looking at it with great trepidation, because I have a lot of, mental health issues. Like, you know, I can't sleep at night, I get really anxious, and, you know, I have depression, anxiety, stuff, and, I was wondering, like, I guess I'm just trying to prepare for things to get worse. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about, like, is there something extra that, you know, if you have, like, anxiety at night, you can't sleep.
I was going to make that the next question for her, because I think sometimes, and one of the other symptoms is people have mood swings in terms of maybe mood swings, like a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, like just for that you can't pinpoint to a specific thing. So I was going to have Dr. Dineasha talk about the reasoning behind that and maybe what people can do.
Yeah, so there's as is a common theme here, the shift in the hormones can cause that. And if you have a history of depression or anxiety, that can also be increased at this time as well. So it's great that you're preparing for this and that you're coming to sessions such as these, because then you know what to look for, things that you can do. Generally, I like to start with restorative techniques. So things that you do to restore your body, or you can find things that calm you down. Right, so you can do some 4-7-8 breathing. You can do some yoga, things like that. That's what I like to start with before we add any hormone therapy or any pharmacology. So SSRIs sometimes is very helpful at this time as well. There are certain ones that can help with menopausal symptoms like hot flashes, but can also help the changes in the mood. So that's one thing that we look at. We see if this is something that you've had before or something that's just starting now. Because if it's something that just began in the menopausal period, then adding that hormone therapy can help balance those symptoms. But if it's something that happened before, then we look and see if the SSRIs can be beneficial in addition to restorative treatments, restorative therapy.
Can you explain what SSRI? Yeah, SSRI.
So they're for antidepressants. So yeah, they're selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So those are the ones that can act. And there are some foods that also you were talking about. There's some foods that can help in that terms of that.
I mean, actually, I can tell you that when I went through menopause, anxiety was one of my big things. And I wasn't someone who had ever suffered from anxiety, but it was, and what helped me was going through acupuncture. And it made a huge, huge difference. I had to get on a plane, and I was like, I don't know if I can get on this plane. I went and saw an acupuncturist, and I've never had a problem since. So, and then, diet is always affects your moods. So once again, the sugar, make sure that you're like really taking the sugar way down, because that will definitely cause you anxiety.
And the hypnotherapy and the cognitive behavioral therapy helps at this point as well. So I would explore those. Yeah.
Are these alternative therapies covered by insurance?
I would maybe some insurance for the clinical hypnotherapist that I usually refer to. I don't. Oh no, she does. She does take some insurance. Yeah. So it would depend on your insurance, I guess. Yeah.
Sometimes have a network.
Yes. Sometimes. Of course.
I think in terms of exercise too, and Tina is a certified personal trainer and a menopause specialist, but exercise has also been shown to reduce anxiety and also to help. If you start now before you get into perimenopause and menopause stage, I think it's going to be helpful in helping manage your symptoms so that your body. The reason why exercise, or one of the reasons why exercise works, is because it amps up and turns on our sympathetic nervous system during the exercise. So our heartbeat goes up, our breathing harder, we're amping up in a controlled state. And when we stop exercising, then it turns it off, right? That rest part. And so that allows our body to at least be one part of how we can help manage our symptoms of anxiety, because I suffer from anxiety too. We think we all do at some point. But it helps us manage it because it teaches us how to turn that on and turn it off in a controlled manner, so that we're not having to deal with the whole heightened state throughout the entire day. So it's just only one piece of the puzzle, and I don't think you can exercise your anxiety away, but I think it's one thing that we can add to our lifestyle because it also has been shown to reduce a lot of menopausal symptoms when we can have good heart rate variability, when we have good cardiovascular endurance and things like that as well.
And then the last one before we go into a deeper dive with each person is discussing brain fog that happens. I saw a meme that said, like, I will remember lyrics from a 90s song before I can remember what I'm going to the other room for. And yes, it's a thing.
Yes, it's definitely a thing. And again, because of the shifts or the change in the hormones. So certainly in terms of brain fog or decreased cognitive decline, sometimes adding that estrogen early on can be very helpful. They found that if you add it later, so after age 65, it can actually increase your risk of dementia. So it's called the timing hypothesis and the healthy cell hypothesis. So if you add it when your cells are already healthy and you're young, that's when you get the most benefit from it. So certainly that, and all of the things that we talked about before. Increased stress can certainly add to that brain fog, so decreasing that, having all of those restorative techniques, exercising as well, just keeps your body healthy, keeps your brain healthy. So anything that's very active, spending time in social environments with friends, keeping your brain alive would be very helpful during this time and beyond.
Does the brain fog go away? I'm sure people want to know.
So the brain fog can go away, so it doesn't stay there always, but again, you have to do things to help it. You have to do things to keep your brain healthy, because aging alone can cause the brain fog, right? So it can go away if you do things to improve it.
Am I right in thinking even in pregnancy, sometimes they get brain fog because of hormones?
Yeah, so the pregnancy brain, I don't know if you heard of the pregnancy brain, so certainly where you forget everything, it's pregnancy brain, then mommy brain, then, perimenopause brain, the menopause, continues. So, but yes, there are things that you could do to train your brain and to improve it as well.
Fantastic. We're going to go into the specific questions. So Laura, we're going to talk about, answer the questions about food. Maybe you can talk specifically about the best type of eating lifestyle to have, like postmenopause.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about food, like how you should eat. It's important what you eat, and I will answer your question about the phytoestrogens. It's really important what you eat, but it's equally important how you eat. So you want to have a healthy diet, right? What does that mean? You want to eat foods that are clean foods, that are, free of pesticides and colorants. There are three things that you always want to avoid. You want to avoid high fructose corn syrup in anything. That's really bad. And you want to avoid colorants in things. You want to avoid fats that are really bad for you. Now fats, you want to have omega-3 fatty acids, which we never have enough of, and those you can get from salmon or cold water fatty fish. You can get them from avocados, you can get it from olive oil, you can get it from flax or flaxseed. So it's very important to have omega-3 fatty acids. They stabilize hormones, which is really important. We've been talking about hormones this whole time. This is one way that you can take a little bit of control over your hormones by what you eat. You also want to make sure that you eat protein. Now, and it doesn't matter whether you are an omnivore or a vegetarian, you can still have protein. Protein from animal sources is absorbed better than from plant sources, but it's not that much different. It's about a 10 to 20%. So that means that if you are a vegan or a vegetarian, you need to just eat more plant protein sources than you would if you were just eating meat. The other thing you want to do is you want to have breakfast. So you really, ideally, the best way to eat is to have 6 meals a day. 6 small meals a day. You want to have breakfast, you want to have a snack, you want to have lunch, you want to have snack, you want to have dinner, you want to have snack. Now these can all be teeny tiny. For breakfast, you can have a smoothie with protein powder in it on your way to the subway. That's your breakfast. You can have a handful of almonds for your snack. So when I'm saying you need to eat, 6 times a day, I'm not saying that you need to sit down and have 6 meals a day, like these huge. That's ridiculous, and you would definitely gain weight and you'd feel horrible. But you have to have, your body has to have something to work on. It has to keep your blood sugar levels even. So, and I work a lot with my clients on how to manage what they're eating in quantity. So it's always small quantities of good foods over time. Protein with breakfast is really important. And yes, you can sit down and have eggs and ham and the whole thing. But like I said, you can have a smoothie with protein powder in it, and that would do it too. Or one of my favorites is rice cakes with almond butter and some fruit. That'll do it. You need to have something. And the reason you want that at breakfast, most people will have their protein at dinner. So you're going through the day and without protein. Most people have desserts for breakfast, right? You're having muffins and croissants and all that, which has nothing in it. No protein for sure. And then you have your protein, you'll have your protein for dinner. Well, the reason you want to have your protein for breakfast is because it boosts your metabolism. And we know that with testosterone decreasing, your metabolism is being slowed down. You want your metabolism to speed up during the beginning of the day so it gets you going through the rest of the day. You don't need a boost in your metabolism at 8 o'clock at night. So it's very important to have some protein with your breakfast. I think those are the most important things when it comes to eating. You want to always make sure that your sugars are the least. I mean, sugar is not a food. We have macronutrients. We have proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. These are macros. Macro means big. We need a lot of those. Then we need micronutrients, which are all the minerals and vitamins and minerals. Those are all under micro. And we need both of them, but we need them in various amounts. So you want to have carbohydrates. You want to have non-starchy carbohydrates with lots of fiber. You want to have fats. You want to cut out the saturated fats as much as you can. You want to have fats that are really healthy fats. You don't need a lot, but you definitely need them. And they're good for your brain development, so you definitely want that, especially when we talk about foggy brains. Phytonutrients. Phytonutrients are nutrients that come from plants. There are estrogen types of estrogens that are found in some plant material, especially soy products. So soy products like edamame, tofu, tempeh. Do these help with symptoms? It depends. The research right now, is what I've read on it, is that it's negligible. It will work for some women and not for others. Also, the amount, it takes a lot more of those phytoestrogens than you would ever get from hormones. So I would suggest that you try them and see if they work. You may be one of the women that, wow, that's all I have to do is if I up my my estrogen through food, I'm okay. But it may not work for you, or it just may be negligible. The other thing about estrogens in food, like soy products, soy is a big commercial product. It's huge. We have soybeans. Most of the soy that we produce in this country goes for animal feed. It is highly sprayed. It is not clean. So if you are going to eat soy products, make sure that they're organic. So you want the organic soy, the organic edamame, and you always want food that is closest to real food. Eating real food is important. So there's a difference between eating edamame, which is soybeans, and I don't know, there's so many soy products out there that are just processed, super highly processed foods. The less processed your food is, the better it is for you, because your body is then going to be able to absorb what the nutrients from the food. But if all the food is chemically processed food, and it's more chemical than anything, you're really not getting anything from it. It's very, very negligible, the amount of nutrients you're going to get from something like that. So if you are going for the soy products, make sure that they are, as close to real food as you can get. I just want to say one thing, because this is something that makes me very crazy. And when I'm talking about supplements, which we're not really going to talk about a lot here, but I always ask what supplements people are taking, because you definitely, I think it's important to take calcium. It's important to take vitamin D, because the other thing that happens with menopause is we lose bone density, and then that leads to osteopenia, which leads to osteoporosis. So calcium, magnesium, vitamin D are really important. When you take vitamins and supplements, be really very aware that these are not regulated. So you want to have very high quality supplements. You do not, please do not take the gummies. I mean,
Good to know.
I don't know, but they're all sugar. So what are you getting? You're not getting anything. I mean, they're easy to eat, they're fun to eat, they're great colors. And one thing I said that we should avoid is colorants. So what do you have in the gummies? They're all different colors. It's just bad. And so did I answer your question about the phytos?
Yes, I have a follow-up.
Okay.
Thank you for answering that question. There's also the phytotestosterones, like with the asparagus and other foods that also have either phytotestosterone and or phytoprogesterones.
I think it's very limited, the amount that is in those foods, but those are healthy foods, so you're going to get the other benefits from them. Okay.
I'm going to ask two questions, and add in terms of diet. So what's it called? Macro diet. I had a question come in on my DM saying that a lot of fitness professionals seem to do it and it works. I wanted to get your take, and also what's also advertised is, what was the other one that I had?
Intermittent fasting.
Intermittent fasting. That these are the hot menopause diets. So please talk about that.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the intermittent.
Okay, so this is the thing. Yeah.
As you eat.
Yeah, no, I am totally, yeah. All right, so I am not someone that believes in diets. If you work with me, one of the things that you'll find is that I believe that you should eat well, that you should enjoy your food, and that you don't go on diets. I think that diets work, but they work in the short term. And I think with intermittent fasting, it's the same thing. If you do intermittent fasting, you will lose weight, but it's going to be on the short term, and it's not going to help with any menopause symptoms, and it's not the healthiest way of eating, because you want to have your body needs food, it needs nourishment. To stop eating and then start eating and then stop and then start, what's happening to your sugar? It's going up and down and up and down, and that's a very bad place for it to be.
So I eat between 11 and 7:30 every day. I'm not an early person, an early day food person. So you're saying that there's an impact in not.
Yeah, and I don't think, I've worked with people that have that sort of, I can't eat that often, I can't eat that much, I can't eat that early. And so what I normally try to do is I try to figure out, is there something you can eat earlier? Is there, can you have just a little bit of something? Because if you are someone that, let's just say you have dinner at 7 o'clock at night, or even 8 o'clock at night, and then you don't eat until 11 o'clock in the morning, that's a very long time that your body is going without any food, and that really affects your sugar levels. That's why I think it's unhealthy. So if you eat something just to keep that sugar even, I think it's much healthier. And that's why I don't really,
It could be anything.
right.
Have some nuts.
Yes, yes, it could be, yeah,
And it could be as small as a handful of almonds.
right. It could be. Yes?
So how does your recommendation change for like someone who is pre-diabetic or diabetic?
I'm sorry, if what would I recommend to someone who's pre-diabetic?
Yeah, like pre-diabetic or diabetic.
Right. Well, someone who's pre-diabetic or diabetic would be someone that would really need to watch their sugar intake, would need to really watch their carbohydrates, and would need to eat more frequent, smaller meals. I mean, when you're a lot of times, what you really want to be careful of is your carbohydrates. You want to make sure that they are there's a carbohydrate load, which tells you how quickly foods how quickly they become sugar in your blood system. You want to make sure that you're eating foods that slow that process down.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that, you know, like if I have high insulin resistance, then I don't like I guess I feel a little worried about eating frequent meals. And like
Are you talking about your blood
afraid of,
sugar?
huh?
You mean in terms of your blood sugar, and you're asking her like how to keep your blood sugar?
Because of the blood sugar.
Is high insulin resistance the same as pre-diabetic?
No. No. Insulin resistance just means that the insulin is not getting into the cells. The cells are resistant to the intake of insulin.
But like that's what leads to prediabetes. Like prediabetes and diabetes.
Right. Insulin resistance is fine. But yes, so you want to make sure that you don't have as much sugar in your blood. You want to make sure that your blood sugar levels are always even. And that happens, you keep them even by always eating throughout the day. I mean, you're not, and it also, of course, depends on what you're eating. You're not going to be eating high sugar foods all through the day. That would be detrimental. You would have to eat foods that take a long time to convert into sugar.
Right. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I get you're trying to get at, but I don't think the recommendations are necessarily changing in what Laura's recommending, because I think the idea that you're having in your head is that I'm pre-diabetic, I should eat less. But what Laura's suggesting, which I agree with, is that you need to have your sugar levels maintained because you don't want to go into starvation mode, because that only inhibits and worsens diabetic symptoms. And I think that's the myth that people with pre-diabetes and insulin resistance have. So I have insulin resistance as well, and so sometimes it leads to pre-diabetes, not all the time. But you could just have insulin resistance and then just live your life with insulin resistance. But ultimately, the idea should be having healthy foods and eating frequently that don't trigger your sugar. So you should be monitoring your sugar as someone who's pre-diabetic, insulin resistance, or diabetic. So you're going to know what foods are going to be creating those spikes, and that's when you're going to be able to avoid them or limit them. But you should still be having frequent proteins, frequent fats. Otherwise, your body does go into starvation mode, your sugar drops, and then you're going to have a quick spike as soon as you eat later on, right? So you want to make sure, what Laura's saying is that you have this like kind of little happy little wave of sugar and not allowing yourself to drop dramatically, because your body will also go into a stress mode, your cortisol will increase, and that also does increase and creates a glucose spike as well. So you want to make sure that you're at a happy medium and not going into like a starvation mode, which is why I also don't ever recommend intermittent fasting to my my clients either. But if they're already in an intermittent fasted state and they want to continue with it, then I try to help them work with that diet. But I never will say, hey, you really should go to intermittent fasting, right? It's just some people just love it, so. We'll go with it.
I'm going to ask you your question. So I know Dr. Dineasha has already covered a lot of facts for us. So maybe the question will be for you, how can anyone advocate for themselves with their gynecologist? Or like what kind of things should they be talking to their gynecologist about?
Yeah. So the first thing, if you're having symptoms, you certainly want to bring it up to your gynecologist. I like for patients to write them down because the symptoms may be varied. And sometimes when you get there, especially if you're seeing like a traditional gynecologist, a lot of times they only have 15 minutes. So you have to write it down so you know exactly what to talk to them about when you get there. And with the brain fog, you might forget too. So write it down, write it down. You want to bring it up to them, and a lot of gynecologists, especially if they're not menopause trained, they may shut you down right away. Say, no, we're not talking about this. Don't even bring up hormones. You're not doing it. No. If that happens, and it does happen a lot, unfortunately, then you want to find a menopause specialist. So if you go to menopause.org and you look for find a provider, you can search on there within, I think it starts with 5 mile up to 25 mile radius for wherever you are. On that website, they'll have a lot of specialists who are interested in menopause, so they may be a member of that society, but you want to look for someone with a NCMP after their name or a NAM certified menopause practitioner. So that would give you the clue that they're certified in that. The website? Oh, NCMP, so it's NAM certified. NAMS is the North American Menopause Society, so NAM certified menopause practitioner. So that's what you want to look for. And that just means that they have special training or advanced training. Because unfortunately, in medical school and in residency, you would think that an OBGYN gets training in menopause, but no, they don't. I believe that the last statistic was 1 in 5 residents were confident in treating someone in menopause or menopause symptoms. So after residency, you really have to sort that out. Yes, OBGYN. Yes, yeah. So with OBGYN, most of your training is OB heavy, right? So you do a lot of deliveries. You have to do all day, you're delivering. You do a lot of obstetrics and then a lot of gynecology with hysterectomies, removing fibroids, things like that. That's where all of your training is heavy. You may get one day in menopause. You're seeing a menopause patient and talking about hormones maybe one day, but that's really it, unfortunately. So after residency, you really have to search out that training on your own. So you and the Menopause Society, they offer training in that. They have a special certification or exam that you have to take. And after you take that exam, which is quite a difficult exam, after you take that exam and you pass it, then you become a NAM certified menopause practitioner. So if you bring your symptoms to your gynecologist, you want to discuss it, and if they shut you down in terms of hormones and even talking about it, I definitely would recommend. And if you're local, I'm in Hoboken, I could certainly see you there. Also, another society is ISWISH, or the International Society for the Study of Women's Sexual Health, and they're very big in talking about sexual dysfunction, vaginal dryness, difficult with intercourse, things like that. So they're very big, and they have practitioners who are specialized in that as well. So you could certainly find a provider there. But in terms of advocating for yourself, you know your body, you know your symptoms, you know that something's different, you know that you're having palpitations, I have night sweats, I have hot flashes, I'm having this brain fog, I'm not sleeping, you know you're having all of the things. When you talk to your gynecologist about it, if they don't want to hear you or they say, no, we're not talking about, or it's natural, you're aging, everyone goes through this. No, like that, you don't have to suffer, especially these, you don't have to suffer. There's so many treatment options, hormonal or non-hormonal, restorative techniques. You could seek acupuncture for all of your different symptoms. There's so many things that you could do, and you deserve someone to listen to you, to talk to you and offer you different treatment options.
Any questions about that?
How do you work with people like natural medicine, like acupuncture? Do you work in tandem with them? And also the dreaded question, do you take insurance?
So to answer your question, yes, I'm in Hoboken. I work for CarePoint Health currently, and yes, I do take insurance there, so you would see me there. And yes, I work in tandem with them. I'm also board certified in lifestyle medicine, so a lot of my practice is lifestyle. I do both. I do gynecology and menopause medicine and lifestyle, and I like to optimize that first, because if your lifestyle is not optimized, I can give you as many hormones, but that's really the key. That's the base of it. So yes, I work with cognitive behavioral therapists. I work a lot with a hypnotherapist, and I do work with the acupuncturist in Hoboken. So I try, and it's everyone, right? It's a team. That's usually what I tell you. You're the captain of the ship. I'm kind of there with you. I'm part of your team. We're all the crew members of the ship to get you where you need to go, right?
the acupuncturist you work with under your umbrella?
They don't work for, so I currently work for Cape Health, so they do not. They're they're outside of that, but we work, well together, and I certainly get their recommendations, and we discuss the case. They give me recommendations for the patients, and I send patients to them.
Typically, acupuncturists don't take it.
Yeah. I refer to them. I'm not sure if they take the insurance, but I take it. Yeah.
There's TCM acupuncture on the road down the street.
They take insurance?
No, they don't.
Oh.
It's just not very expensive, and I've gone to her before.
Okay.
She, did the, you better go, it's hot. She looked at me, and I'll say she just helped me with some, some symptoms.
Good to know.
Down the road.
Fantastic. You're going to be next, Dr. Llanes. So, we'll talk to Dr. Llanes. When should someone see a pelvic floor physical therapist? What can you help them with? Common things that you see, and then talk about insurance too.
Sure.
Because I think that's a common question.
When should someone see me? Whenever. Don't wait till you have issues, right? But seriously, in all seriousness, you could see me at any point. You don't have to have issues. Sometimes I just do the way I see you see a physical therapist, it's just like your physical. You see them, you do a quick check, you're done in that session, but just so we have something to work with. But generally speaking, that never really happens. It's happened twice, but really it's when anything is limiting your function. So if you feel like you're going to the bathroom frequently, if you feel like you're having constipation, if you're having any issues with anything like that, pelvic floor-wise, pain during intercourse, trouble even orgasming as well, is it also something that people don't realize I work with as well, because that could be a musculoskeletal issue as well as a lifestyle thing that we could work on. But I also work with orthopedic conditions, things like that. So anything that limits your function, like pain or bowel issues or genitourinary issues, you can come see me, right? And it doesn't have to be severe. Don't wait for it to be severe, because it does take a little bit longer. So just to explain is so what a pelvic floor physical therapist does is I'm looking at you in a physical therapy standpoint that you generally think of, orthopedically. So I'm doing watching how you walk, watching how you move, checking your mobility and your strength. And I'm doing that of your entire body, including your pelvic floor, because your pelvic floor muscles are muscles as well. And I'm seeing how those contract and how those can relax as well. Because a lot of people think that they need to do Kegels, and I don't know why Kegels is the big go-to exercise for your pelvic floor, because the biggest thing that we need to do is learn how to relax it. And so our pelvic floor is where we hold stress. It's also where we hold stability. A lot of times it's elevated, and it should be like a trampoline. But a lot of times we're holding it up like it's a tarp, right? So we need to learn how to relax it so that it can function better, right? So that's generally what I do, and I work from, we do one session or we do, a whole year. It really depends on everyone, because everyone usually asks how many sessions it takes, and I work with whatever your symptoms are.
Part of
Insurance?
Oh, and insurance. So that's a good, I know that was going to be a question, right?
Yeah.
I don't personally take insurance. If I can go a whole spiel on why. But I do also take, if your insurance has out-of-network benefits, then you can apply for reimbursement. I also take HSA, FSA. But the biggest reason why I don't take insurance is because insurance does limit our care. So if you do go to I'm not saying all places, but if you do go to a place that does take insurance, you may find that you're there a little bit longer in terms of sessions-wise, because they have to maximize your units. It's a big game on how to make the most money, and I totally get it, because you have to work as a provider. But I don't like to play the insurance game, and I like to base my sessions only on what your symptoms are and things like that. So if people do have financial issues, then they could either apply for reimbursement. I provide a super bill, or we work on. I give you one session. Here's your plan. We do a check-in a year or a couple months, things like that. So that's just kind of my whole quick spiel. Yes?
Oh, I was just wondering if you had low-hanging fruit for relaxing your pelvic floor.
Yeah, so actually let's do something right now, because I love this. Everyone place your hands on your lower belly, right underneath your belly button. Close your eyes so that you don't feel silly. And just take a deep breath in. Notice where you're breathing from. And notice what's moving. Do you feel that your chest is moving every time you inhale? Do you feel your lower belly pushing into your hands as you inhale? Now, if you're saying yes, great. Keep doing that, taking big belly breaths in and relaxing out. Now, if you feel like my chest is moving, my shoulder is moving, and I don't feel my lower hands moving, that's where we need to work on for your pelvic floor relaxation. So everyone just close your eyes, inhale, allow your hands to lift and push out as you inhale and feel your belly expand. And then as you exhale, you feel it relax down. Inhale in, feel your hands lift, and then exhale out, feel it relax. So you can all crack open your eyes. So a big part is think of this whole area as a balloon. My pelvic floor is here, my core is here, and it wraps all around. It's not just our six-pack abs. But if we don't know how to breathe into our lower belly, we will not create that stretch in our pelvic floor. And what happens when we're stressed out? This is where we breathe. So our pelvic floor constantly stays elevated, and it's never getting that nice stretch. So we're not gonna have that nice trampoline effect in our pelvic floor. So the first step is always breathing, and if you know, that also relaxes us too if you can work on diaphragmatic breathing. So that's my low-hanging fruit. That's what I'm always working on with people is breathing first, Kegels way later, okay? Any other questions?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So part of this being created was because Dr. Llanes sees people in her practice. She was like, oh, this is a menopause thing. Maybe talk about some of the symptoms that you commonly see, even though we probably talked about them, which is what inspired this masterclass.
I think the biggest inspiration for me, and if you see my Instagram, follow me there.
Right here?
Then you're gonna see that it's a lot of birth and obstetric stuff and all of that. That's kind of where my niche has gone, but I do work with a lot of menopausal, perimenopausal, postmenopausal women. And the biggest issue that I was having was hearing that A, they were having a hard time finding a provider that was a specialist, and B, a provider that listened, right? And so I ended up becoming their regulator and helping them refer people out. But the biggest part, they were just like, you know, my provider says there's nothing wrong. They're doing my tests, and there's nothing wrong with me, but I'm feeling all of these symptoms. I'm feeling stressed, I'm not able to sleep, I'm having pain, but my tests look okay. Or they say it's just part of aging. And so that's what inspired this whole thing, was why can't we have just a workshop where we can have the specialists and have us answer questions, but have like the specialists, right, that know what they're talking about, and just kind of spread the word that there is help out there, and this is not something that you just have to live with. So that's kind of where I came into this.
Love it. I'm going to talk about exercise, but let's get up for a second because we've been sitting too long. So let's get up. We're going to stand up.
It feels good to stand.
And then, you know what? Let's do a little stretch together. So reach both your hands up towards the sky, and then take your right hand, grab your left wrist, lift your rib cage up, and then gently tilt towards your right side. And then let's go back to the center. Take your left hand, grabbing the right wrist, lift upwards, and then gently tilt towards the left side. Come back to center, and then let's just grab our hands from behind us, and we're going to bring those hands overhead as you're bending forward, just to let some blood come to your head. It should feel good to be standing a little bit, and come back to stand. You're going to give me 3 squats or whatever you can. So if you want to make some space, you're just going to squat down to get low. And this is the proper form for not having constipation. All the way down.
Yes.
All the way up.
This is your...
Yep.
No.
The not hovering. So we don't want to always be hovering. And then we'll come back to sit. I'm just going to talk a little bit about exercise, and this is our last main thing. So we've talked a lot about food and movement. What we also need to do is exercise. So for the integrity and the longevity of our bones and our muscles, which also become compromised just with aging and postmenopause, is it is important for all of us to lift weights. Lift weights, but also include either a HIIT or a sit type workout. HIIT stands for high intensity interval training, and sit stands for sprint interval training, and I'll go into that. So oftentimes people newer to strength training will ask, well, what's the perfect amount that I should be doing? And so the most important thing is whatever the amount is that you're going to just stick with it, because the consistency of it is the most important. But as a beginner, if you can be doing it once or twice a week, that's perfect. And in terms of just if you're not a beginner, at minimum twice a week is fantastic for your health. You just think about, as we get older, when you think about your grandmother, how they seem weaker or whatever, and that naturally just happens with our bodies. We lose muscle, we do get weaker. And in order to not have that happen, you have to be challenging your body. So that's essentially what strength training is.
What is sit?
Oh, I'll go next. SIT stands for sprint interval training. And we'll go into that after strength training. So in terms of strength training, in order for you to build or create muscles, build strength, create muscles, you have to challenge it. It's just like our emotional health, right? In order to have emotional strength, we have to have been through emotional challenges to be able to get through it on the other side. And I always think of strength training as the same thing. So if something is very easy for you to do, you're not necessarily getting stronger. I mean, you're continuing to do that, but you need to challenge in order to build strength. So with strength training, not only does it build muscles, you're also helping your bone density. When bones are stressed through physical activity, it helps activate the cells, I think they're called osteoblasts, that triggers them to build and repair bone. And post-menopause, I have this statistic because it always blows my mind, is 67% of women over 50, so most likely to be post-menopause, have either low bone density or osteoporosis. So 67% means 2 out of every 3 women. And I'm actually one of those 2, and I think you are too. So I was diagnosed with osteopenia, which is low bone density, and I've been lifting heavy weights for the past more than 10 years. And I mean, I lift with barbells, I use kettlebells, and for me to have osteopenia was a bit of a shock. But genetically, I'm more inclined. I think for Asian women, 20% of Asian women have osteoporosis, and it's genetics, it's build, it's a lot of things, and it probably would have been worse if I hadn't been lifting weights. So strength training is one of those things that we do have control over. Like, we can't control nature, can't really control hormones, but you can control the activities that your body does. So before we talk about the sit and the HIIT, this research fact also blows my mind. Strength declines 30% between the ages of 50 and 70. So that's basically post-menopause. We're just losing strength naturally. And we have our biggest loss of muscle after the age of 60. And this is just again, it's just nature. So the thing that we can do is by lifting weights. When we think about lifting weights, you don't have to be thinking of it as like a CrossFit. We got to do an hour for, an hour 5 times a week. Even if it's half an hour twice a week, but doing it consistently is extremely helpful for your body. The other thing that I mentioned that I think that's not talked about as much is doing a HIIT or a sit. So HIIT is high intensity interval training, and sit stands for sprint interval training. And oftentimes we'll think of it as like an Orange Theory or an F45 where it's like an hour-long thing. It's not meant to be an hour-long thing. It is 20 minutes or less, 1 to 3 times a week, and this is what it is. So high interval training means you're pushing your body to more than 80% of what it can do. So I don't know if you've ever done anything where you're just like, oh my God, I can't run any faster. Like, my legs are gonna fall off. That's like your 100%. So you're getting somewhere close to that, but in little bursts. So you're doing the activity, you rest. You do the activity and rest. So I'm gonna give you an example of what a sprint interval training would be like. There's an exercise protocol called the Tabata. And in the Tabata, you're doing 20 seconds of work. I'm like, oh yes, it's just 20 seconds, but literally 20 seconds, just going as hard as you can. So if I was on a treadmill, I'd be running as fast as I can for 20 seconds. And then I would stop or rest for the 10 seconds. But here's what the hard part is. I'm doing that 8 times. So as you can imagine, if you're going as fast as you can, by the 7th or 8th time, even though you have that little break, you feel like you've been really pushing it. But the total work time, like the total amount of that workout or that time is actually only just 4 minutes. But by doing that, you're helping your cardiovascular health. It's helping your insulin resistance, as in your body not being as insensitive to insulin, because you want the sugar in your blood to be going to your muscles rather than becoming fat. And these type of exercise, the workouts, the HIIT or the sit, is helpful. And as we get older, we need to maintain something like that during our regular exercise. But it's not a 5-day-a-week kind of thing, because that's going to be really taxing on your nervous system and on your body to be doing that 5 days a week. I'm just talking 1 to 3 times. So you're talking less than 20 minutes each time. And of course, depending on the age, it'll be something very different. So like at 50, at 52, I might do the treadmill thing, but for someone who's 75, their intense effort is going to be a little different. But it's just that idea of like pushing yourself hard for a little burst of time, regularly. You can also think of it as it's training your body to be powerful, because one thing we lose when we get older is power. And an example of that is one of the tests they have for older people, and this is an example of what power is, like how many times they can get up and down from a seat, right? I could probably do this fast, but imagine someone who's 80, it's gonna be a little longer, right? To be able to pop out of the seat and sit back down. And you wanna keep your body practicing those, being able to react, to have the muscles, be able to sustain itself. And so that is like why the importance of the HIIT or the sit besides strength training. That's my spiel in terms of maintaining exercise.
So for strength training,
Yeah.
you want to do that for every part of your body or just your arms and legs?
Oh, I always think full body, because you just like your joints all move in different directions. You want whatever you're going to be doing your whole body, so not just arms and legs. But the thing is, when you're doing anything, you are using your full body. So even with squats, people think of it as just lower body. You're actually using your core. So it's hard to squat, and you can squat by not engaging your core, or you can't really actually. But I noticed that when
Call squats strength training?
Oh, yeah. Oh, so that's a very good question. So what is strength training? I think oftentimes we think it's this like special esoteric thing. It's a lot of things you probably already know. So strength training would be like squats, push-ups, bicep curls, lateral raises. Resistance bands, yeah. So resistance bands are great, but you're going to be challenging your muscles only to a certain level. So that's why when people talk about lifting heavy, you can train with a resistance band. It would be hard to get to a certain level if you were to do the same exercise with weight. And the idea of like being able to, pick up your suitcase. I know people talk about put it up above in an overhead bin. That's strength training. But you can do things in your exercise that helps make those things easier. And I think that is the ultimate goal of strength training, just not losing that ability to do the things you want to do in everyday life. Moving all the time helps, but I think just going to do workouts for your muscles that help you in the everyday life, that's the goal, to have like a good quality of life when you get older. So the last question I have for everyone is if they could give you one resource that will help you in terms of like women's midlife health or postmenopause, I would love to hear.
So definitely
Oh, would you do that?
the menopause.org.
Oh, grab that.
The menopause.org, that has a lot of resources there. I usually give those handouts to all of my patients as well because it's great. And it's also evidence-based. So evidence-based information is the best. You could certainly look at TikTok and some Instagram, not ours, but other Instagram, that does not have evidence-based information, and then they would recommend supplements and things like that may not be helpful. So any evidence-based sites are good. Menopause.org, and for a book, there are 2 that I love. Estrogen Matters by Dr. Ava Bluming and Carol Travis. Those I love that one, and the Menopause Manifesto by Dr. Jen Gunter.
That would be my resource too.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, those are
Yeah.
great ones. So
That book's
menopause.org
fantastic.
and those books.
I don't have any specific ones. I do like that estrogen book a lot. I also just want to say that I know that a lot of people use Dr. Google for a lot of things, and I don't think that Dr. Google is your best resource. However, I'm sorry, Dr. Google. Dr. Google. I don't think that Dr. Google is your best resource. However, we do, there is a lot of information. Just make sure that it's evidence-based. Like PubMed is a really good resource. PubMed. Yeah.
It's where a lot of research
For a lot of,
reports are
it's a lot of
uploaded.
research. So if you're going to do that and you want to go online and want to find out something, that is definitely like a resource that's credible, and there's a lot of research behind it. So always make sure that wherever you're getting information, that it is research based.
I also recommend Menopause Manifesto, but I had a feeling you were going to recommend it. So my other book that I recommend is just called Come As You Are. I think that's a great book to help empower you as a female, as a vagina owner, because I think it helps you take charge of your sexuality so that you know how to talk to your physician. And I think that we get so scared to talk to your providers because we come from a place that we are scared to say the word vagina and vulva a lot. And I've become someone who freely says it as for everything. So, but being comfortable with that allows you to be comfortable with your providers and really take charge and hold up to that. So.
You guys took I guess if you are more athletic, Dr. Stacy Sims has written 2 books, and hers is very, her research is only about women's health, and everything she cites is just studies that have been done on women athletes. Any of her books are fantastic. Thank you guys for coming here. And welcome to our inaugural Menopause Masterclass. Thank you.
We're done now.
Oh, yeah, does anyone have any more questions? Or I know we answered it during.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for the Saturday afternoon.
Invite us again.
What's that? Invite you again?
I just wanted to say that I think I have everyone's email address, that everyone's left it, and just check your emails tomorrow. I think we'll send you a little thank you gift for being here, and it'll be a little recipe booklet for recipes that support menopause. They are all very easy. There's some smoothies and there's some.
Oh, I love it.
Some
We're getting one
salads
too,
and-
right? One of those.
Yeah. So if you don't get it, check your spam and your trash and your,
Reach out to us if you don't get it, and then we'll get it to you. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your Saturday.